Good morning. We're learning as a chusr for Shlema Filan Chabai Sarach. We're on Daf Beis, Amid Beis, Sechtas Menachos, if anyone's this confused. Okay, so by the two dots, or the one dot, about 10 lines up from the bottom, where we're just going to remind ourselves that we're coming to answer. I'll give you the structure of the next blot, essentially. We had said in our Mishnah that Menachos, if you have a machshava shaloi l'shema, it's going to be kosher, but lo ya'al ba'alam shem chayva, unless it's a specific Menachos, like a minchas chayta or minchas kenois. Those are not just going to be lo ya'al ba'alam shem chayva; they're going to be possible altogether. And we brought on the top of the summit, which we can really put the Mishnah on the side, because the Mishnah is as it is. We already pretty much, for today at least, we already discussed. We asked the question that Rav Shimon seems to say not like our Mishnah. Rav Shimon, in the Bryce on the top of the Amud, says that a mincha, whenever you do a mincha shaloi l'shma, it's going to be entirely kosher. It's not just going to be kosher or carbon. It's not going to be just a kosher mincha, but it's also going to be all b'alam shem chayva, because minchas are ma'aseh meichichan Allah. You can look at the mincha. The example we give of a mincha that's shaloi l'shma is you do a thin mincha when you say you're doing a thin mincha, or you say you're doing a thick mincha, but you see in front of you that you're doing a thin mincha. So it's self-validating what it is. So even if you say something shaloi l'shma, we could ignore it because we see what you do. That at least is going to be the way Rav is going to understand it. Ultimately, we're going to say, according to two of the pshatim, that's not what it means, but that is certainly the pashta pshat, the way to read it. Okay, so that's what Rav Shimon says over there. That's on the surface not like our Mishnah, but more importantly, it's not like a different Bryce. Or Rav Shimon says in the Bryce in the middle of the Yomid that we learn for Kachei Kachim Hi Kechatas Ka'asham, that very much like what we said in the Mishnah, that most Menachos are going to have a din that it's kosher. If you do it shaloi l'shma, it's kosher, but the Bailim are not meratza. They're not going to get a ritzui. It's not going to be Allah Bailim Shem Chayva. And the minchas chayta and the minchas kenayis, it's going to be like a chatas, that it's going to be that if you do it shaloi l'shma, it's going to be entirely no good. So you have a stira. On the top of the Yomid, Rav Shimon said that mincha, since it's self-evident when you look at it what it is, that it's not, that it's always going to be fully kosher. And in the bottom, the second brisa, he says not like that. He says it's like everything else, that if it's going to depend. If it's shaloi l'shma, then it's lo ya'al shem chayva. If it's, unless it's a minchas chayta or minchas kenayis, then it's going to be entirely possible. So we said so far we said Rabba's pshat. Rabba, and this is, we're going to stick with Rabba basically for the whole Gimel Amud Aleph. For the next while we're going to go on Rabba's pshat. Rabba explains the stira in the Brises that the first Brisa that said, where he said that it's always going to be kosher. That's by where he did a shinui kodesh, where he said I want to bring a minchas. I'm bringing a minchas machvas, and you look at it, you see it's a minchas machashes, or vice versa. But if it's a shinui bailim, if he just said, he said, I'm bringing let's say Ruvain brought the mincha, and the kohen says, I'm bringing this l'shem Shimon. So you don't see anything when you look at the carbon that indicates that what he's saying is not true. So on that, we would say it's going to be shaloi l'shma, that it's going to be lo ya'al b'alam shem chayva. But if it's a shinui kodesh, where he's saying that it's where the kohen is saying that it's a minchas machashas, and you look at it and you see it's a machvas, that's going to be, we're going to disregard what he said, it's going to be kosher. Okay, that's where we're up. So now we're up to elamayata. If this is true, that we say that wherever it's ma'aseh meichichan Allah, wherever you can look at it and see what he's saying is not true, why are we saying this is only by mincha? Oilos oif shemoko lamailo b'shem chatas oif tirtze. The rule is that oilos oif is supposed to be brought on the upper part of the mizbeach. A chatas oif is brought on the bottom part of the mizbeach. So when we say Ma'aser Chichalon, if the person, the Bailam separated an oilos oif, and he's saying, and it's being brought by the Kayin, he's doing it properly as an oilos oif on the top part of the mizbeach, and in the meantime he's saying it's a chatas oif, tirtze. It should be a fully good carbon. By looking at where he's bringing it, we could see that it's really a oilos oif, in spite of what he's saying. So let's disregard what he's saying, just like we said by the mincha. So the Gemara answers no, because what do you think? He said where he did the malika, is not going to change the validity of a chatas oif or an oilos oif. We do the malika of a oilos oif on the top because in order that you should immediately be able to do the nesinas dam on the mizbech, but where the malika is itself is not really going to apostle it. The malika can really be done in any spot. It's not going to invalidate the carbon. So you can't say from the fact where he's doing it is indicative of what he's doing. So if he's saying that it's a chatas oif, even though he's doing it lamaila, it could be really it is a chatas oif. It's supposed to be done lamaila. But fact the Gemara, oilos oif shemitza dama lamaila l'shem chatas oif tirtze. I'll bring you a different maila, not from the malika, but when someone brings the oilos oif, where the din is oilos oif is supposed to be applied directly to the top part of the mizbeach. And he's saying, as he's applying the dam to the top part of the mizbeach, he's saying, I'm doing it l'shem chatas oif. But you're looking at it, you think what he's doing is proper for an oilos oif, not for a chatas oif. So it should be my samay chichan. The chatas oifi lamata havavidla. If it was really a chatas oif, like he's saying, he would do it on the bottom of his beach, and he would also do hazah. The chatas oif, in addition to where you do the dam, the oilos oif is applied directly from the neck of the bird onto the mizbech. While a chatas oif, first there's a hazah. First you spritz the dam with you like fling the dam from a distance onto the mizbech, and then afterwards you apply it. So the fact that he's applying it directly to the top, that's not the avodah of the chata. So it should be my sameh chichan Allah. So the Gemara says no, it wouldn't necessarily prove anything. The Amar Mar mitzvah dama b'chol makom mizbeach shera. Even though there is a hazah that you do for a chatas oif, you spritz it, but then afterwards you apply it. So when he's applying it to the top of the mizbech, that's not necessarily probative. It doesn't force us to the conclusion that it's a oilos oif. It could be a chatas oif that he spritzed underneath, and now he's applying the dam on top, which is b'diavad kosher. Now the Gemara asks another question: chatas oif shehiz a dam lamata l'shem oilos oif. When someone, so what about if it's the other way around? Until now we've been talking about someone who's actually bringing the oilos oif, and he's calling it a chatas oif. What if it was really a chatas oif, which is supposed to be hazah together with a mitzvah on the bottom, and he spritzes it. He does a hazah lamata, and he says l'shem oilos oif. Tirtza, that should be we should say maseh mechichnala. It should be a kosher chatas oif. The maseh mechichnala, the chatas oifi. It must be a chatas oif, in spite of the fact that he's saying it's oilos. The oilos oifi l'mayla hava avidle, mitzvah hava avidle. There is no hazah for oilos oif. So why is he doing a hazah? And it should be done on the top. So the Gemara Hachanami, you've caught us, and we've got to give a unsatisfying answer. When it says that we only find by a mincha that we say this svara of Ma'aseh Mechichala, but it's not similar to zvachim. It means only karbanis of an animal. But Eina Chanami Na'ifis you could be the same as a mincha. If you would do this exact setup where it is Ma'aseh Mechichan by an oif, according to Rabbah, that would also be Ma'aseh Mechichan and it would be Meratza.
So I didn't understand. Why do we disconnect Zvachim from?
Because in the Brisa of Rav Shimon that we're trying to understand on the top, he said that by Menachos it's going to be fully kosher because it's Maseh Meichich. You can look at what he's doing and you see it's not what he said. He's not doing what he said, so we could disregard what he said. But he said Zvachim are not like that. Zvachim, you can't tell because it's the same shchita, it's the same, right?
No, but in this case, we said.
So we say by the oif you could tell. So he's saying I'm going to distinguish between zvachim and oifes. Even though I said zvachim and kain, that just means animals, meaning like a sheep or a cow, but not oif. Oif I'm going to concede is going to be the same as a mincha, because we have this example of an oif. When Rav Shimon said I'm excluding zvachim, he didn't mean to exclude oifes. Zvachim means what we call an animal, not a bird, right?
So in that case, by oifes there is a case where it's machia.
Yeah. So and therefore it will be if you do something where it's muchach, that what you said you're saying you're doing something different than what you are physically doing. We'll disregard what you say. It's not going to be lishma at all. Shaloi lishma. And we'll say the bailam are going to get a ritzui. It's going to be fully. He's going to get a kapara. We're going to disregard totally what you say, just like by a mincha. Okay. I mean, in the end, you're not going to be happy after this whole Amud. We're going to say the same thing by Zvachim, that there are some Zvachim also that are going to come to the same conclusion, that it sometimes is evident that what you're saying is not what you're doing, and therefore it's going to be kosher. Yeah, it's going to be just right. Yeah, there's so many. There's
definitely going to be some.
Right. You're skeptical. That's one thing that you've learned from all the Gemara we've seen is to be very skeptical and know that if they have to find something, if you have a lot of options, they'll find something.
Right.
You can always find the Eitzah.
There's a lot more as welcome than oifes.
Right. Okay, so now the Gemara asks, Kachim Kalim, Sheshachtim, and so we're going to start with the Kachim, with the Zvachim. Why can't we find Kachim where it's evident from what you're doing that it's not like what you're saying? Kachim Kalim, Sheshachtim B'darim. If you have Kachim Kalim that is supposed to be shechted in the north part of the Azara, and he shechts it in the south part, L'shem Kachei Kachim, and he's saying, as he's doing it, I'm doing Kachei Kachim, but he's doing it in the south part, Liratzu. We could say that, even though you're saying you're doing Kachei Kachim, you're doing it in the south, which is not where you bring Kachei Kachim. The Kachim Kalim, you could see that it's certainly Kachim Kalim, because otherwise you would have done it in the north. The Kachim Kachim. But Zavan Avavadu. So the Gemara Kachim Kachim Ninu Mi Avid Hu Da'avid B'Shachat Luhu B'Dar. The Gemara says, no, it's not my Sam Meichichan Allah. Even though it's not really similar to what we said before by Marcheshes and a Machvas, where he's saying I'm bringing a thick loaf, and you look at it and you see it's a thin loaf. Over here, even though he's doing it in the south, and he's saying it's Kachei Kachim, and Kachei Kachim are supposed to be done in the north, you could say he did the wrong thing. He's violating the instructions.
It doesn't pass the shita, right?
It does pass. But does it pass? If it would pass, then I guess it wouldn't be relevant. No, it would pass. I think it would pass. The shchita b'darim would pass. But we question that it's not really kachei kachim. It's really kachim kalim. So we're saying he did the wrong thing and he passled. The person would think that he passled it. But as long as there's a plausible thing that you could believe what he's saying, then you can't say it's maseh meichichin. It's instead of it being the person could believe, instead of it being a kosher, a kachei kalim, maybe he believes it's a pasala kachei kachim that he did in the darim. But now the Gemara asks, maybe it's the same thing. Why don't we say the same thing by where he was really doing a thin loaf, and he claimed he was doing a thick one. And you look at it and you see it was baked thin. Haide kakamitz lal machashes. Amar haide machashes nederhu. the Maisila b'machmas, the Mechashasi, Ma'avid Hu Da'avid Ba'aisi b'machmas. Maybe really it is a Machashas, it is a thick one, and when he baked it incorrectly. Even though he said I'm bringing a Machashas, he baked it in the thin pan, and he made it thin, but it really was separated to be Machashas. So Gemara, no, that can't be. Hasam Kinabe Machashas Nada, over there, even if someone had originally said, I'm bringing a Machashas, Ki Maisila b'machvas, if he would then, after he said, I'm bringing a thick, he made a neder that he's bringing a thick mincha, and then he bakes it in the thin one, machvas haba, it switches. You can convert. It's not as a faith. It's not as determinative. If you say I'm going to bring a machashas, if you say I'm going to bring a machvas, we're going to see a Mishnah that says that if you then don't carry out what you said, it just switches over and becomes the other one. Kedetnan, like we see in the Mishnah. Someone says I'm bringing a thin mincha, behavior b'machashas, and then he goes and instead he bakes it and he makes the thicker mincha. Machashas behavior b'machas, or vice versa. Masha heavy. Well, we treat it. We don't say that he's possible it because he didn't bring what he said he's going to bring. We say it now becomes that even though he said originally he wanted to bring a machvas, if he now made a machashas, it becomes a machashas. And then he still has to bring what he had originally promised. So it's essentially going to be that it's going to be kosher, and it's going to be treated as the new version of what he actually made it to be. And he still has a neder that he has to satisfy his original neder. So therefore, the Gemara is saying you can't say like we said, legabe the kachim kalim that you did, kachim that you did in the Durham, that you said maybe he violated what he said. Over here, if he just didn't follow what he was supposed to follow, that doesn't just make it that it's going to be possible. It's going to switch over, and instead of being what he had originally been nadavid for, it switches over and it becomes the new thing. So it wouldn't be my Sam my Chichanallah. I'm sorry. It would be my Sam my Chichanallah. By right over here, it would be my Sam my Chichanallah because it's nan. Zula, in fact, the Gemara, the Dilma Amar Zula Hevi b'machvas v'hevi machashas. The Gemara asks, but that's only true if he said, I'm making a neder that I'm going to bring a machvas, and then he makes a machashas. So we say this new one is going to be a new kosher machashas, and the other one he's still going to have to bring. But if he said zu, he said this flour, I want it to be a machvas, and then he switches to machashas, then it doesn't switch over because he designated he wants this particular flour to be a machvas. So now we can't, even though he made it into a machvas, it doesn't, and he made it into a machashas, let's say, it doesn't become machashas because it's non zula hevi b'machas v'hevi machashas machashas v'hevi b'machas harezu psula. It's puzzle because there he designated this particular flour how he wants it to be brought. So you can't convert it into the other type. So you're correct according to the way the Rabbanon learn over there that if you say zu, it's no longer able to convert. But according to Rav Shimon, keep the Amar Rav Shimon af yidnei nidra yatsa. He said in the first case that if someone said I'm bringing a machvas and he didn't say this flour, he just said I'm bringing a machvas. Rav Shimon says, and then he ended up switching it and he brings it in a machashas. Rav Shimon says he's yoitza his machvas. Rav Shimon says we say that when he originally made his neder, this is now being yoitza that neder. We say that when he puts it into the container, that's what it is, and it doesn't make a difference what he originated. According to Shimon Taka, doesn't make a difference whether he says zu or he says a lie because he's going to be yaitza his original chiyuv anyway. So that's the reason why, according to Rav Shimon, in this case, it's going to be ma'aseh ma'chichanaleh because whatever he's doing, that's going to be the classification of the mincha. So you can't say if he said he was originally going to bring a machashas and now he's doing a machvas, if he originally had said he's bringing a machvas, it's a machvas in spite of what he's saying a machashas, because and even if he originally said machashas, it's going to switch over to be a machvas. Okay. So now the Gemara asks another question. Back to the same, we've dispensed with this issue. We said that kachim kalam, it could be where he's being over on what he had originally said. So that's not going to be maseh mechichin. We're going to ask another question. If we're going to say that where maseh mechichin is according to Rav Shimon, it's going to be meratza when you shecht an oila as a chatas. He's really bringing an oila. And he says, and as he brings his oil up, the Kohen says, this is l'shem chatas. Terza, it should be maseh moichichin Allah, that what he's saying, that it's a chatas, is false. And it should be meratza, according to Rabbi's pshat. The high zacha behind the keva. An oila is a zachar, and a chatas is in a keva. So, it's not like the last 10 years of lunacy in the United States. We know the difference between a zachar and a keva. So, if he's bringing, even though he's saying it's a chatas, you look at it, it's a zachar, it can't be a chatas. It's like tomorrow, no. There is a chatas that's brought as a zachar, the zachar who? Lo yadi. Even though if he's saying a chatas, it could be really is a chatas, it's the sar nasi, which is a chatas of the nasi that's brought from a male goat. Am l'shem, it's affecting Gemara, but am l'shem, what if he doesn't just say, he originally was said as an oila, and now the Kayin is saying, I'm bringing this as a chatas for a yachid who has to bring, he ate chaylev, so he's bringing his regular chatas. So regular chatas is always a nekeva. V'su, in addition, chatas yachid sheshach b'l shem oila. What about if it's the other way around? If it's really a chatas yachid, an individual has to bring a chatas, and the Kayin says it's an oila. Like we said, an oila is always a zachar, and here it's in a keva, so it can't be an oila. Terza the chatas, the keva oila is zachar. And but the Gemara michsa ba'alya. No, even though I said we know the difference between a zachar and a keva, it's not always so easy to tell. Between you and me, if we were on the farm, we wouldn't be able to tell the difference between an oila and a keva and a zachar. He says that if it's talking about by a sheep, there's like a tail that covers it over. It has a alya that covers, and you don't know. Even though theoretically you should know, you can't see. So even though he's saying, even though it is a zachar, and he's saying it's l'shem oila. I'm sorry, chatas yachid shach l'shem oila. So no, it's in a keva, and he's saying it's an oila, and oila is always in a zachar. Maybe you can't tell whether it's a zachar or a keva. So that's good where it's a sheep. A sheep has this alya that covers over whether it's a zachar and a keva. I see sira ma'yikalamim. What are you going to say if he brings a goat? The goat doesn't have that fluffy tail that covers over. Ella ben scham lekeva slava tatayu de inchi. So no, it's not muchach. It's just in general people don't pay attention to whether it's a zachar and a keva. So you're going to say that it's maseh moichichin when the kohen is bringing it. And you see that it's a zachar, and he's saying it's a chatas. You're not going to realize immediately that what he's saying is incorrect because you just don't pay attention to that. It's not evident on its face.
I thought they would be more sensitive in those days. They were on the farm today.
I mean, more perceptive, more.
Yeah.
I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I don't know. Zok the Gemara. Pesach sheshachtu l'shem asham lertz. What about when you bring a Pesach and you do it l'shem asham? The high ben shana. A Pesach uses a year-old sheep, and an asham brings a 2-year-old sheep. A ben shtayim, asham is 2 years old. So you see, if it's really a carbon Pesach, and the Kohen says it's an asham, you'll say it's not an asham. It's obviously a Pesach because it's only 1 year old. So no. Since there are certain ashamas that are 1 year old, like a nazir, asham nazir, and asham mitzaira, so even though it's only a year old, he doesn't know that it's really a Pesach. It might be one of these ashamas that are not 2 years old. But what if he said specifically, I'm doing it as a regular asham when you steal, or asham where someone is male behektish, where those have to be 2 years old? What if it's the other way around? That he's really bringing an asham that has to be 2 years old, and he shecht, and the kohen shechts it, and he says, I'm doing it l'shem Pesach, and you could see it's a 2-year-old animal because it's really asham gzelis. It should be miratza because we say it's maseh meichichnala. Lirtzu the Pesach ben shana v'hani ben shtei shana, because the Pesach is 1 year old and these are 2 years old. Ela bein ben shana lebein ben shtei shana mlavatay tayude inshi. People are not so well versed in the ages of animals. Even again, your question is, you think back in those days, everyone knew what was up with the animals. Yeah. Why? The Ika ben Shana, the Mechzika ben Shtayim, the Ika ben Shtayim, the Mechzika ben Shana. Sometimes one 2-year-old looks like one, a 1-year-old looks like two. I mean, we're thinking like a baby, we could tell the difference between a 1-year-old and a 2-year-old. But a animal, like how long do they live? They only live a couple of years. So I guess by the time they're a year old, they're pretty substantial animals. It's not.
Yeah, they grow fast.
Yeah, they go fast. So Gemara. Sawyer, but there's another question. A sawyer sheshachtu l'shem ashram lertzi, an oila or a chatas could be brought from a goat. A ashram is brought from a sheep. A goat that was brought as an ashram. A sawyer. He said it was really supposed to be an oila, and he separated a goat for his oila. And now the kohen shechts it and he says this is a ashram. It should be meratza because obviously there's no such thing as an ashram that's brought from a goat. The high semev, a high sayer, a sheep has wool, while a goat has fur, it has hair, and they're obviously different. So no, Amri Dichra Ochmahu Hava. Person might get mixed up. He sees a goat, he says it's a shorn sheep. It's a black sheep in the family. After you shear a sheep, I guess for a while it looks like a goat, or it could be mistaken for a goat. All right, I can't argue with it. We know a Pesach and Asham is always brought from a sheep. What if he took a egel? He was going to bring he separated a calf or a par for a shlamim, and then he shechs it, or an oila, and he shechs it, and he said, the kohen says it's a Pesach. You're staring at it. You know the difference between a calf. You're not going to say it's a black cow. A cow and a sheep, even though I could tell the difference, I think. Lirtzu, the egel par Pesach va'asham leka. There's no such thing as an egel and par that are brought for a carbon Pesach or a carbon asham. So that's a good point. Very disappointing after the whole Amid. We say, even though it said zvachem einay kain, because you could tell the difference, we say, no, there are actually some zvachem that according to Rav Shimon, it's also going to be maratza, who's going to say maseh meichichnala. That's the end of Rabba's pshat. Now we're going to move on to Rava, how Rava answers. Rava has a different explanation of the distinction between the Brisa at the top of Beis Amid Aleph, where Rav Shimon says that we say Maseh Meichichan Allah, and it's going to be fully kosher. By Mincha, Shulchan Shema is kosher. And the second Brisa that says that it's going to be Allah, it's Lo Allah Shem Chayva. Rava Amalei Kasha. Kam b'kayim it's mincha l'shum mincha. Kam b'kayim it's mincha l'shum zevach. He says it depends when you're doing a mincha, and he's saying I'm doing it as a mincha. So then we're going to learn out from a pasuk that it doesn't make a difference it doesn't make a difference what your shame was, as long as your lishma, the intention was to make it a mincha, that's going to be miratza. But l'shem zevach, that's not the case. What's the reason? Mincha l'shem mincha v'zois teres hamcha terach z'chol ha-menachos. Because the Torah says all menachos are considered the same. So even if you have l'shem a different mincha, it's still going to be l'shma. Mincha l'shem zevach. It's v'zois teres ha-mincha v'zevach loiksiv. It doesn't say zois teres ha-mincha v'ha-zevach. It doesn't mean, it's not included that if you do a mincha l'shem zevach that it's going to be lishma. And therefore, if you do a mincha l'shem zevach, or you do a zevach l'shem zevach, it's not going to be kosher. It's going to be lo ya'alu b'alam shem chayv. It's going to have the regular din of shaloi lishma. The Gemara asks, this has nothing to do with the explanation of Rav Shimon. You're explaining that Rav Shimon's reason is because there's a pasuk that says no matter what mincha you have in mind, it's always going to be meratza for the bailam. But he said the reason was because it's maseh meichichan aleh. If you look at what he's doing, we could disregard what he's saying because we see. So what happened to that? So Gemara says hachi kamar. No, it's a totally different explanation. It's not really maseh meichichan aleh. It's saying exactly the opposite in a certain way. Even though what he's saying, the reasoning of Rav Shimon is, I would have thought that maybe, even though when he brings a mincha, what he's saying is obviously false, and that would be a reason, if what he's saying is obviously false, is a reason that it shouldn't be meratza. He's saying it's a simple svara. If you're saying shaloi l'shma, he's saying that it's a minchas machmas, and you could see it's not a minchas machmas, that should pass all the carbon. B'tifsel, so he says, he's saying that in spite of the fact that it should be puzzle, because it's maseh meichichin, so to speak, that it's clear that he's not telling the truth, even so, the pasuk tells you, nevertheless, it's meratza for the bailam, it's fully kosher. And what about Umayav v'zvacham einekain? What about by zvacham einekain? He says, he says, and the other way around, was saying, even though by zvacham I might think fakert, it's not so evident that he's telling a falsehood. So therefore, maybe that should certainly be meratza. If we're saying by a mincha, because the Torah said of v'zois teres hamincha that we disregard, we said in spite of the fact that he's clearly saying a falsehood. By zvacham, where it's not so clear that he's saying a falsehood, certainly it should be meratza. He says no, there's no such pasuk of v'zois teres hamincha v'azevach. The pasuk doesn't apply there. In fact, the Gemara, if that's the case, al me'at chatas cheles shokto shem chatas dam. L'shum chatas avetz gechav, l'shum chatas nazir, l'shum chatas mitzaira. If you bring any kind of chatas, because let's say he ate chalev, and he says, I have to bring a chatas for my avera of eating chalev, and he says I'm doing it instead I want it. The kohen says it's for bringing a chatas for dam, for eating dam, or for being avetz gechavim, or nazir, or mitzaira. It should be kosher v'tirtzeh. The Amar Rachman of v'zois teres hachatas. The Torah uses the same lashon that we use by mincha. It says v'zois teres hamincha. It says v'zois teres hachatas. Any chatas should be included. Torah achas chol chatois. So the Gemara Shimon hachanami, ein hachanami. Shimon would say by chatas that it's going to be the same din. You're going to say it's meratza if you have in mind a different avera. Now, some Mefarshim take out the Rabbanim. We're talking about the Rabbanim who are chaylik on Rav Shimon. The Rabbanim ha'amar Rava chatas cheles shachto l'shem chatas dam l'shem chatas avetz gechav sheira l'shem chatas naz l'shem chatas mitzayra psula. They say that if you do a chatas shaloi l'shem for a different avera, it's kosher. But if he does l'shem a different something nazir l'shem mitzayra, it's possible. So why would that be the case? So since both the nazir and the mitzvah, it's not just a chatas. There's a second oila that comes along with it. That is going to indicate to us that this is not really a chatas. He says he's not mechalik. He says not just the nazir and mitzvah is going to be possible. He'll say the same thing if you do l'dam l'shem chaylev. The Rabban are going to say it's possible. But he said they say v'shachar oisel chatas l'shem oisel chatas. But he doesn't. The Torah says v'shachar oisel chatas must be for the proper chatas. So this whole discussion is preempted because there's a pasuk that tells you that the chatas has to be l'shem whichever avera he originally had in mind. Okay, we're going to have to leave Rav Ashi, which is the final pshat for tomorrow. But I will tell you, it's basically under the same structure as Rava, that we're going to understand Rav Shimon fakert from the way Rabbi had understood it.